And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, it's all about Joe Henderson, a jazz saxophone legend from the 60s. A lot of his songs have gone on to become jazz classics, especially one he wrote himself called Recorda Me. So Joe Henderson's music is mainly blues and behop. Also, he's experimented with Latin music. He first started out in Detroit performing alongside other jazz musicians. He went on to lead a band of his own alongside trumpeter Kenny Dorham. They recorded several albums for Blue Note Records. His saxophone style was very distinctive, soft but coarse, with great phrasing and intricate arpeggio lines. Some of his best albums include Page 1, In and Out, The Elements, and more. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Joe Henderson, leading saxophonist and composer. During this hour, we're going to be talking about his biography. Joe Henderson was born on April 24, 1937 in Lima, Ohio. His family were musical, and he had exposure to several different musical styles growing up. He went on to compose music for his college concerts. In college, he also started taking up tenor saxophone playing. He attended college with a bunch of other jazz artists like Donald Byrd and Yusuf Lateef, who would go on to make waves in the jazz arena in later years. In 1961, he joined the army and would entertain troops with his music. He also toured Japan and Europe at the time, where he collaborated with other musicians. After being discharged from the military, he settled in New York City, where he gave concerts at the Birdland Jazz Club. It was on one of these concerts that he encountered Kenny Dorham, who signed him up to a contract with Blue Note Records. His debut album was a massive hit. Even today, it's considered one of the best jazz albums of all time. It was called Page 1, released in 1963. One of the songs from the album, Blue Bossa, also went on to become a jazz classic. He collaborated in the years to come with Andrew Hill, Horace Silver, Lee Morgan, and others. He also began experimenting with different genres: hard bop, avant-garde, Latin, and soul jazz. In the late 60s, he shifted to the Milestone record label. His musical style also changed, from post-bop to fusion and electric music. Also, many of his best compositions were produced during those years. He'd tour in concerts typically alongside Herbie Hancock and Freddie Hubbard. He also played alongside rock and R&B groups like Tears and Blood Sweat. In the early 70s, Joe Henderson moved to San Francisco, where he took up teaching. The early 90s were a particularly great time for Henderson. He produced one award-winning album after another and frequently topped the Downbeat Readers polls with his music. In 1992, he won the Jazz Musician of the Year title and Top Tenor Saxophonist of the Year. One of his albums, a tribute to Billy Strayhorn called Lush Life, the music of Billy Strayhorn, was named Album of the Year and went on to sell nearly 500,000 copies in 1993. Another tribute album, Musings for Miles, won him a Grammy for Best Jazz Performance. He also toured the world extensively. Joe Henderson passed away on June 30, 2001, leaving behind a legacy as one of the greatest saxophonists and composers in jazz. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's episode, Joe Henderson, a leading saxophonist and composer. Now it's time for some trending festival news. Sligo Jazz Project's annual summer school and festival runs from the 22nd to the 27th of July 2025. The festival features a concert and masterclasses by a series of renowned jazz musicians. This summer school is the biggest of its kind in Europe. The masterclass includes training for participants of all levels. The classes are a mix of education, inspiration, and entertainment. So the summer school is a 6-day event featuring great workshops, masterclasses, and jam sessions. And there's the Sligo Jazz Festival, which brings together the likes of Rufus Red, Melissa Aldana, Freddie Hendrix, and more in a delightful series of jam sessions and international jazz performances. Registrations are now open. For more information, please visit sligojazz.ie. So that was some trending festival news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Joe Henderson's best albums of all time. Stay tuned. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashanti Silva. On this week's show, a saxophone legend, Joe Henderson. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. The first one's called Page 1. This one's a great compilation of music, also featuring 2 songs that went on to become jazz classics. One of the highlights from the album was the song Recorda Me, which he composed as a teenager. This song went on to become one of his best songs of all time. Another album called In and Out, also released on Blue Note Records in 1964. Many critics have compared this album to something that was produced by the great John Coltrane. Henderson's joined by a great ensemble on the tracks. Some great songs on the album like Serenity and the title track. An album called Inner Urge, released in 1964 on Blue Note Records. This album went down in history as one of the best jazz albums of all time. The album saw Henderson collaborating with McCoy Tyner on piano, Elvin Jones on drums, and Bob Cranshaw on bass. The album is hallmarked by Henderson's great compositional skills and saxophone prowess. Welcome to the Weekend Jazz Update with Joe Silva. On this week's show, a saxophone legend, Joe Henderson. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums. The first one's called Page 1. This one was released on Blue Note Records in 1963. This one's a great compilation of music, also features two songs that would go on to become jazz classics. He wrote one of them, a Latin-themed song called Recorda Me. He composed a song as a teenager. Another popular Joe Henderson hit from the album, Blue Bossa, composed by his fellow bandmate Kevin Dorham. There's a lot of great supporting players, notably McCoy Tyner on keyboard. Another composition called Jin Rikisha. This one's a nostalgic song that's based on the Japanese rickshaw. The Japanese rickshaw was a man-powered vehicle. Jin means human in Japanese and Rikisha means man-powered vehicle. So this song was a tribute to that vehicle. Also a great composition called Out of the Night, which sees Joe Henderson tackling some blues themes. The song has no lyrics, it's all in the melody, how he moves the emotions through the music. The song Recorda Me went on to become a jazz classic. This one means Remember Me in Portuguese and was composed by Henderson in his early days, featuring a great hard bop melody and a bossa nova groove. Another album called In and Out, also released on Blue Note Records in 1964. This one's a more progressive modernistic album than the latter. Many critics have compared this album to something that was produced by the great John Coltrane. Sitting in with Henderson on the tracks is McCoy Tyner on piano, Elvin Jones on drums, and Richard Davis on bass. So now for some insight into the music on the album, the title track sets the mood right off the bat with a peppy hard bop theme. The song Serenity went on to become a jazz standard. Another album called Inner Urge, released in 1964 on Blue Note Records. This was one of Henderson's earliest albums. It wasn't just hailed as one of his best albums of all time, but one of the best jazz albums in history. The album saw Henderson collaborating with McCoy Tyner on piano, Elvin Jones on drums, and Bob Cranshaw on bass. Cranshaw had just come in after a stint with Sonny Rollins, and he's on top form here. The album is hallmarked by Henderson's great compositional skills and saxophone prowess. The first two songs on the album are jazz classics today. The first song, Inner Urge, is about the inner urge that drives mankind to success, a force from within that motivates people to paint great pictures on the canvas of destiny. Another song called Isotope, which Henderson composed as a tribute to Thelonious Monk. A song dedicated to his hometown growing up in Lima, Ohio, called El Barrero, also a tribute to Spanish music. He basically improvises over the other musicians on this piece. There's also a beautiful love song called Night and Day, which brings the entire group together. So that was some insight into some of Joe Henderson's best albums of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Joe Silva. We'll be right back after some music. Here's Joe Henderson with Lazy Afternoon. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Joe Silva. On this week's show, it's about Joe Henderson, a leading composer and saxophonist. Now it's time for some trending festival news. There's a great jazz festival at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center taking place in November, featuring artists Sandoval, Stanley Jordan, and a lot of others. Tickets are now up for sale. The festival spans 2 weeks. The festival starts with the Omar Sosa Quartet of Americanos performing. Omar Sosa is a Grammy Award-winning artist, and he and his quartet will be performing some great Latin rhythms. On Thursday, that's the 13th of November, it's artist Sandoval, a trumpet legend. Artist Sandoval's won 10 Grammys, and he's taking the stage with some great Latin jazz and Afro-Cuban jazz music. On Saturday, the 22nd of November, Stanley Jordan takes the stage. Stanley is a world-renowned guitarist, and his performances feature some great covers of Jimi Hendrix classics. Jimi Hendrix is one of Stanley's biggest inspirations, and this concert is a tribute to him. The Nat Adderley Quartet take the stage on Sunday, November 23rd. Their performance features an iconic jazz brunch that takes place every time the festival is held. The music features some of the Nat Adderley Quartet's best songs, ones inspired by Chick Corea, John Coltrane, and Thelonious Monk. And on Sunday, the 23rd of November, the Sarah Vaughan International Jazz Vocal Competition takes center stage. This is one of the most iconic jazz singing contests and takes place every year at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center. This year